And as we enter the Holiday Hell season, the real Holiday Hell, the one right here at ECW, not the one being promoted by the World Wrestling Federation. Todd Pettengill talking about Holiday Hell, trying to be extreme. The last extreme thing that geek did was pass a kidney stone on live radio. That, pal, is the highlight of your announcing career.
Hello, my name is Bob Bamber and welcome to the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast, going back in the time machine to December of 1996 for Volume 3 of this month's show. 6 volumes for you this month. In order, Volume 1 is your WCW show looking at Barrae. Volume 2, your WWF show looking at In Your House, It's Time. Volume 4 takes us to UFC with UFC Ultimate 1996. Volume 5 is your end-of-year review show, and Volume 6 is the all-important end-of-year awards. We're here in Volume number 3 to look at ECW, and we're joined firstly by Erick Landstrom. Erick, good morning, I think. Erick, hello.
Yeah, good 11:07 on the West Coast here. How are you guys today?
Close enough, very well. And a good evening, Chris Lacey. Chris, a lot closer than Erick is. Chris, hello.
How are we, Bob?
I'm very well, thank you. We start with the news as always. And, Chris, new champions.
This month we've had 2 title changes. Raven has regained his world heavyweight title, and the Eliminators have regained the tag team titles.
From the Gangsters. We will cover both of those during the show. More news on one of the big discussion points from last month, the mass transit story, Chris.
So, details have come out that Q-List needed 50 stitches to close the wound that was which was done to him by New Jack, but there was no serious injuries. Coming out of it, there is a bit of some issues on pay-per-view. The Request Network, which pretty much is one of the biggest ones in the US, has said as of the 12th of this month that they will not be showing the pay-per-view for the ECW pay-per-view going forward. This basically is looking like that one of the major suppliers of pay-per-view across the US not showing it will do damage to the figures. Roughly about 70% of all pay-per-views are held by this company. So obviously now the figure that they will get most they're looking at is a 0.5 buy rate.
And Chris, any more info? Because I know reading through, this is a very fluid story. It's been a fluid story for months, but I think it's come to a head in the last month or so, probably on the back of the mass transit story, in the sense that basically Paul Heyman did an interview with the Pro Wrestling Torch, I think in early December, where he said, "Oh yeah, we've sent videotapes of this to all the major pay-per-view providers and all the TV companies that we're working with or looking to work with, just to make sure they're aware of it." The Request, the biggest one of them all, a couple of weeks later said, "Yeah, we don't know anything about it," which is, ECW to a T. You might say. But Chris, where we're at the point of recording, as I understand it, like Request have spoken to them again, and it looks like the April date, it might be back on the March-April time, but there's still some stuff to get through. Is that how you understand it?
Pretty much. They're still looking at sort of dates. Easter Sunday keeps coming up as the most likely of dates, with it being a week after WrestleMania. But in doing so, about 10 of ECW's stars have been signed to 6-month exclusive contracts. So clearly trying to make sure that they don't lose people in big money matches for said pay-per-view.
Yeah, we don't know those names. I suspect we could take a pretty good stab at guessing who they are. Not that we will. But interesting, the first time to my knowledge that anyone in ECW has signed any kind of contract beyond just a kind of show by show basis. And ECW kind of taking on WCW in, just the latest round of battles when it comes to talent acquisitions.
So, ECW have sent legal papers to WCW regarding a report from the ever popular and libelous Mean Gene's 900 number that Scott Levy, aka Raven, will be going to WCW. Obviously, ECW have put in a formal legal complaint about this, so as such, we probably might not see him going just yet.
Well, probably one of the guys that was signed a 6-month ECW contract. You would think.
You'd imagine so.
That would make sense, because you would imagine anyone they didn't might be a bit of risk of leaving. And finally, a match between Barrae Dudley and Brian Lee interrupts a hockey game in New York.
Yes, so at a spot show, Brian Lee and Bubba Ray Dudley managed to go onto a roller hockey rink whilst the game was still in play. Lee grabbed a stick from one of the players and hit Bubba Ray with it. Then Bubba managed to throw them through into the goal. However this probably looked for the game whilst going on was probably a sight to see. Also in said match, people going through merchandise tables and even referee getting choke slammed. But, of course, only in ECW.
Only in ECW. Eric, any input on any of the stories we're spoken about?
Right, well, I won't hammer on it, but the mass transit situation, that just seems like it's going to continue to snowball into 1997. Like you said, the ramifications of it probably haven't been fully developed, but in my non-podcast world, this one really hits me at the core, and I'm afraid that ECW might not survive this with all the legal ramifications that it could bring, but we'll see. Everything else, good to see Raven. Good to see them put the belt on somebody who can actually wrestle a 10-minute match without shenanigans or interference in Raven. And I'm not going to be surprised if we don't see New Jack anytime soon in ECW with everything that's going on. So the Eliminators getting the belts back, not very surprising in my opinion.
Well, we saw that New Jack was a very regular feature on TV this month, but I know what you mean as time goes on. But we'll see about all of that. So first of all, let me just quickly plug Patreon while we're here. As people probably now very well know, we are on Patreon for $5 a month. We're offering early access to shows like these, or if you just want to say thank you for our podcast output, you can find out more at patreon.com/wrestling20rs. Links on our website or in the podcast description. A quietish show this month, I think, as was the case to a point this time last year as well. ECW do some shows kind of early doors, but no big one. And then around Christmas, they kind of close up. So there's TV, but as you'll see when I go through the TVs, they kind of run short of stuff to show us, but still there's some interesting stuff worth sticking around for, certainly, as we start with TV on December the 3rd. I think you never can tell where ECW is concerned. We see fan cam footage of an impromptu match or a live event between Rob Van Dam and Taz, which stops when music hits and we see the BWO in the crowd. It's pinned while having a Taz mission locked in, but he turns it over until Van Dam gets the ropes. Taz doesn't release the hold and some jobbers come out to pull him away. We see highlights of Mikey and Chris Candido from last month. Joey Styles, as always, attempts to say the match was a close one, even though Candido won by a mile. He then says Mikey found himself without a tag partner at a recent live event. Given recent events, that may not have been the smartest thing to say, given what happened in Revere a few weeks earlier. Candido praises Mikey and their eventual opponents, the Eliminators. It's nice to see some ECW in some different venues, as it feels a bit more memorable. Mikey goes for a Frankie Mikey off of the top, but gets shoved through a table on the floor. This match ended up being quite decent. The Eliminators finish off Mikey with a total elimination. We then get a lot of promos ahead of the Holiday Hell show. We see a lot of Buna McGillicuddy, you get my drift. We finish back at the first live event with Tommy Dreamer pile-driving Francine before Brian Lee interferes, enabling Douglas to pin Dreamer. Douglas goes after Beulah, but Pitbull 2 comes out and runs off both Douglas and Lee. Taz warns the BWO, not playing darts. Taz warns the BWO about doing dumb shit during his match.
Gary Wolf. In the season to be merry and jolly. You can thank yourself for being such a big man because you've given. You've given, Gary Wolf. You've given of yourself. In a season of giving, you have given of yourself. You gave to me the franchise. You were block number 1 in the building blocks that have built my legend here in ECW. Gary Wolf, as you sit this jolly season in your house, and you've got the tears welling up in your eyes because you want to get back in the ring. You've got the heart of a gladiator, like each and every one of us have in ECW. You love to participate in the sport of wrestling. You love it hardcore. You love the pain that goes along with the injuries. You cannot stand, though, Gary. You cannot stand that an injury has taken you away from the sport that you love. But hey, Gary, you've got so much to be thankful for. So much to be happy about in this season of giving. So much to be thankful for as you sit around your Christmas tree. Because, Gary Wolf, you have something far greater than I could ever give you. You've got your memories, Gary Wolf.
You are such a man.
And I've got your girl.
Now we move on to ECW Holiday Hell. Eric, if you can kick us off with the results of the show.
Sure thing. The Dudley brothers, comprised of Bubba Ray Dudley and Spike Dudley, defeated Little Guido and Davey Paisano, also known as David Tyler Morton Jericho, in a tag team match. Balls Mahoney defeated Devin Storm. Gary Albright defeated Rick Rage. Brian Lee defeated Louis Spicoli. Taz defeated Rob Van Dam. The Gangsters defeated Axel Rotten and Devon Dudley to retain the ECW World Tag Team Championship. In a mixed tag, Francine and Shane Douglas defeated Beulah McGillicuddy and Tommy Dreamer. Sabu defeated Perry Saturn. And Raven defeated the Sandman in a barbed wire match to capture the ECW World Heavyweight Championship.
And a caveat, as with a lot of these smaller ECW shows, the results of the evening and the tape that we got were slightly different. There are a few of the matches on this show that we didn't see, including one between Sabu and Perry Saturn that I have read described as horrible, largely down to Sabu being very jet-lagged and apparently 4 tables breaking prematurely, which is a lot by any standards. Because you'd think by the time the second one did, you might change plans. But anyway, Chris, of the show we saw, what do you think?
It was an easier watch than last month, though that would have been because it was half the length of last month. But all in all, the in-ring stuff, it was good, but not as the highest level that we have seen from ECW through most of this year.
Eric, first foray into ECW on the podcast, what do you think?
Right, well, I've watched a fair bit of ECW in my time, and the thing that struck me about this show, or at least the tape we watched, there was no balance between the violence and the wrestling, and that's usually what makes ECW palatable to a wider array of wrestling fans here. I think owing to the fact that the Sabu Perry Saturn match, which was probably meant to be the wrestling match on the card, was apparently the shits. This is just a little bit too violent without any wrestling to balance it out. So an uneven card, but still decent, still a decent watch, all things considered.
Yeah, I always have to say this with ECW shows, but I often wonder whether your perception of this show just depends on how much of it you've seen, and more pertinently, what you've seen. In that sometimes I feel like watching a lot of ECW means you might enjoy certain shows less, and yet on this occasion, I actually kind of wonder whether, having seen a lot of ECW, I probably enjoyed the show a little bit more. As Chris alluded to, the copy of the tape we had last month from November to Remember was about wall to wall, about 3 hours, and this was about half that length, which helped. And Chris, I don't know about you, but I'm giving them far too much credit in this case. But just a nice relief to see some different pairings.
It was one of those of the matches weren't rinse and repeat like we normally have been having recently. Obviously, Taz and RVD, makes sense, but it's a new matchup. Brian Lee and Louis is different than Brian Lee being a goon for against Dreamer or doing something for Douglas. Axel and D-Von going for the titles is different than it being the Gangster or the Eliminators that we had recently. Of course, we've had the standard of Douglas and Dreamer and Raven and Sandman, which we sort of have to have. You have to have one of the running feuds going through. But, having a few different matches in there does mix it up and makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the stories of the month as a whole, but we'll come to those various bits as we get to it. Anyway, we open with the promo from Little Guido questioning JT Smith's judgment following him losing a loser-lease town match last month. He says if he has the guts to return to the ECW arena, then he'll kick his ass. Not sure Smith's going to return anytime soon. I think he's left the area. First up, it's Little Guido and David Paisano. That's David Morton, Tyler Jericho, as Eric mentioned the results, versus Barrae, Dudley and Spike Dudley. And Paisano on Guido on the outside. There's about a metre between the ring and the guardrail, so he just presses Spike over the top onto them both as well. Fans chant, "Let's go Spike." Spike gets Irish whipped into a chair, being held up by Paisano, and just about kicks out. This is chaotic to follow, given the editing, lots going on. Spike kicks out of a tiger bomb by Guido. Bubba gets a hot tag, fires Guido off of the ropes and then hits an exploding diamond cutter, which Joey calls a Bubba cutter. Paisano breaks up the pin, but Bubba hits a Bubba cutter on him too. Then Bubba kind of sits on the top rope. Spike then jumps on his shoulders and comes off of Bubba's shoulders with a big splash, and the Dudleys win. Chris, what do you think of this?
It was pod highlights, so, it didn't have that point where it drags on a little bit, but from what we saw, was really good. Spike, as we haven't really seen much of him as the babyface in peril looks really, really good and is really believable because of his size. And those Bubba cutters, if he's going to continue doing those launched ones, I can see them being really interesting. If he starts using tables or chairs or something like that as part of them, they could get really interesting really quickly.
I think Dallas Page might need to nick the exploder part of that spot. Eric, what do you think of this match?
This was a fun little tag match. I think Bubba's designed to get Bubba over and maybe to get that Bubba cutter over, and that's just a top-line finisher in my opinion. Chris is absolutely right. Spike takes a hell of a beating, maybe one of the best in the business. Guido's really good too. Didn't really see a lot of Paisano in the version of the tape that we saw, but this is just a fun little match with an excellent tag team finisher with Spike and Bubba. No complaints at all.
No, you're right. In terms of the opener, what we saw, we didn't see that much of it. But that probably helped in that when you've got kind of, Paisano's been around a couple of months, Spike's been around a couple of months, Guido's not been around that long, and neither was Bubba. From a viewing perspective, you don't necessarily want to see 10, 15 minutes of these guys, because it's like, well, none of them are really over. But I suspect they cuts out the bit where the match was a bit flatter, and we ended up with highlights. And yeah, Bubba's, like, for all they've been hiding Bubba, he's quite good. It's almost like, I wouldn't mind seeing him in that kind of spot we saw Hack Myers in last year against someone like Sabu and Stevie Richards and people like that. Just see if you can give him a longer match and see whether he can go. He might be able to. Seems like he's got those big power moves down. Whether he's capable of wrestling a big long match, we don't know. But yeah, decent little opener, I thought. Move on next to the Bulldozer, Brian Lee versus Louis Spiccoli. Chris Candido joins Joe Styles on commentary. The story they're telling with Candido is that he's ill. That is largely a bit of a kind of story for the sake of the match. This does get, when they package this for television, they do front it with about a 2 or 3 minute interview clip with Candido. Not that you need to see that to make any sense of the match. But as it appears on Hardcore TV, there is a bit more context to it versus what we see here. Oh, that made sense. Lee runs over Spiccoli with a clothesline. He goes for a big boot, but there's way too much daylight as they mistime it. Lee hits a trio of running elbows to the down Spiccoli. Spiccoli blocks Lee into the corner. The ref tries to pull him away, but he shoves the ref over twice. Spiccoli is bleeding above the eye. Lee puts Spiccoli in the crowd, then climbs to the top before thinking better of it. He resets by putting Spiccoli this side of the guardrail, grabs some brass knuckles, I think, and comes off the second rope and hits Spiccoli in the crotch. They get by the merch table. This is kind of right around the back of the fans. Lee suplexes Spiccoli through the table. He then gets given a small violin, I think. We get back towards the ring eventually. Lee bounces Spicoli's head off a supporting beam. Back in the ring, Lee places a chair on Spicoli's chest. Comes off the second rope. Spicoli launches a chair at his face. That looked really good. Spicoli rallies, hits a body slam, but Lee pokes him in the eye. Spicoli, now blinded in both eyes, it seems, hits a Death Valley driver on the referee. Lee goes for a primetime slam, but Spicoli kicks him in the bollocks, then hits a Death Valley driver. There's no ref, so outruns Candido, who attacks Spicoli till he gets hit with a Death Valley driver. Out comes Shane Douglas. He puts on the referee's shirt. Spicoli hits Lee with another DVD, and Douglas counts the pin. Obviously, the match is still going on. Douglas and Spicoli start brawling after the match. Spicoli sets for a Death Valley driver. Lee then knocks Douglas off, hits the primetime slam on Spicoli, and the fallen ref counts the pin. Out comes Pitbull 2. The numbers game catch up with him as well as Candido, Douglas, and Lee take control. Candido hits a splash from the top. Lee then picks Pitbull up and hits a primetime slam over the top through a table on the outside. That looked really nice. Eric?
Yeah, Bob, as far as walking brawls go, this one was okay, but I do think they could have used the editor's discretion a little bit more here. It just felt like it went on a little bit long with the brawling part of it. And, you know, this is a pretty good match. Louis excellent, in my opinion, and he looked great in a loss. What I'm more interested in this ending, I thought, you know, it was kind of convoluted, but as far as ECW goes, not that much. And I think Candido and Shane and Lee could be a really cool heel stable. You know, you look at every good stable in the history of wrestling. You got Candido as the strong worker, kind of the measly little twat heel. Shane can be the mastermind, the Ric Flair type of the group. How ironic would that be? And then Brian Lee can be the heavy, and they can mask his obvious deficiencies in run-ins, tags, managerial roles, etc. So as far as the match goes, it was fine, but the end of the match, I think, is far more interesting.
Chris?
Yeah, as Eric was saying there, you know, it was the sort of your standard walking brawl. You know, it was a good brawl. It was a good quality. You know, they did some good stuff there. But as he was saying, obviously with Douglas and his two new buddies, reminding me very much of Shane before he left when he had Benoit and Malenko as his little running mates. Could we get
it's like downgrade in that department?
Yeah, you know, they're not as good in the ring as those two, but obviously we've seen it before where Shane quite happily has bodies and bodies to do his bidding for him, and it would then mean that he's got it can give a new aspect to the feud with the Pitbulls. It can mean that he's got other bits and pieces that he can go forward with. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where they go with it.
Yeah, I said that the match was fine. I think both guys are probably capable of better, but I think, you know, you both kind of alluded when you, given how you ordered your answers, that clearly the priority with this match wasn't necessarily the in-ring action, it was kind of everything going on around it. And with the viewpoint that as a trio, I think Erick's right. Douglas is the front man. You've got Candido, who is the best wrestler of the three. I don't think Douglas, if you asked him on the right day, would disagree with that. And Lee is a guy with enough upside. You know, he's a spot guy who I think you're right. You know, Lee and Candido as a tag team would make a hell of a lot of sense. They're still trying to work out what they're doing with Candido, and it's not to say they joined them together, but there was enough insinuation going on they might during this match. And yeah, the angle just about works. I think Spicoli is this. You know, we're going to talk about this more probably in the end of year review show, but Spicoli is part of this kind of group of guys that ECW brought in this last few months that's more kind of now what ECW is going to be about in 1997, where it's more about, rather than using guys on the way up, because the guys on the way up, there's now so much going on with the big two, that the guys on the way up aren't going to be staying around at ECW much, you know, for any kind of length of time. You only got to look at Dan Crawford and Doug Furness for an illustration of that. But Spicoli's one of those guys kind of got spat out the other side by the WWF, a bit like Candido. And it's like, well, this guy's better than the sum of his parts that WWF gave him. Can we do more with him? And yeah, I think as I alluded to at the top, it was just nice to see Brian Lee not working with Tommy Dreamer. Feels like he's been doing that for 6 months, and that's probably because he has been. I'd like to see him a bit longer of a match. And yeah, I think the angle just about worked. Chris, a bit more on Douglas and the triple threat. It's maybe the best point for us to discuss this. I think you're right in the sense that it is going to make sense that if they're going to do Douglas against the Pitbulls going forward, that him as the heel act can have the numbers game as soon as Pitbull 1 comes back.
Well, that's the thing. There was a few sort of rumours that I didn't want to sort of cover in the news because it was not non-confirmed, but Pitbull 1 is pretty much looking like he should be back in the early part of next year. So obviously, if you're going to have both of the Pitbulls, you can't just put them against Shane and Francine. So you sort of need to give Shane some buddies, or at least sort of one person that he can team with. So obviously, putting him with Candido and Lee means even when the Pitbull 1 gets back, they still have a numerical advantage. It will still sort of leave that heel side of, Shane being an utter little cowardly prick and, taking advantage where he can, which is what he should be as pretty much the main heel on the company.
Yeah, I think in that regard it makes sense in that the Pitbulls can reunite and Lee and Candido can get run over, and then Douglas is the guy that claims the advantage just because he's a spare man. I think it makes a lot of sense. Eric, any more thoughts before we move on?
Only that I think this also presents an opportunity to put Louis in a relatively long-term storyline. He could maybe come in and help the Pitbulls even up the numbers game down the line as well. So I think everybody comes out a winner here.
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely. We move on to Rob Van Dam versus Taz with Bill Alfonso. They face off. Taz marks a line in the ring. Matt Van Dam walks right over it, so Taz slaps him, and we get underway. Taz goes straight for a choke and takes control. He hits a double arm hook German suplex. Van Dam hits a monkey flip, then a drop kick from the second rope. Taz regroups on the floor, so Van Dam gets on the top and hits a somersault plancher to the floor. As ever, these spots always look a bit weird when the guy taking the move has to just blindly stand there and wait to catch him. Anyway, Taz is struggling. Van Dam hits a double underhook facebuster and a rolling somersault splash, but Taz gets his knees up. Taz runs over Van Dam with a big clothesline. We go to the outside and Van Dam gets whipped into the guardrail. Taz hits a suplex. Alfonso is going nuts on his whistle. Taz then hits a lovely Northern Light suplex of the bridge for a near fall. Van Dam grabs a chair, hits Taz with it, then just flings Taz into the corner and launches a chair at him. That got a great reaction. He then drop kicks the chair into Taz. The chair throws Taz, then throws the chair back at him and starts rallying. Van Dam throws a chair at Taz, who catches it. Van Dam hits a spin kick for a lovely near fall, and the crowd are right behind him. Van Dam misses a spin kick, and Taz hits a big German suplex. Taz goes with a Taz mission. Van Dam actually manages to get to his feet, but Taz keeps the hold locked in, and he collapses to the floor again. Van Dam hits a leg sweep, but Taz manages to hang on. Van Dam gets to his feet, does the Bret Hart spot from last month, runs up the turnbuckle into a pin, but this time Taz kicks out. He then finally cinched in the move, and Van Dam passes out. Chris?
Well, this was awesome. RVD has taken on the mantle of Sabu of let's use a chair in really initiative ways and sort of going, I know what I can do. I will use it like this, and just brings out random stuff. Lobbing the chair seems to be a better way than hitting people than just actually hitting them with the chair. I mean, it looks so much better. Taz, again, great suplexes. Every month we say it whenever we see Taz in matches, but the way that he throws people about, I could sit there and watch that for hours. And our good old favourite, because it wouldn't be ECW if we didn't say that fucking whistle and Alfonso being an absolute fucking annoyance outside the ring. So much so.
That never gets old, does it? Sorry, Chris, carry on.
But, the mix of styles in this, really, really interesting. And if anything, it's a bit of a taster of what we could get from Sabu and Taz when that finally happens. Because obviously RVD isn't as dangerous and sort of, triple jumping himself over things as Sabu is. But that sort of mix of high flying and sort of innovative offense against getting thrown around with suplexes. We sort of got a nice bit of a taster of it, and I can't wait to finally see that Taz and Sabu match.
Eric?
This was a very good match. It was a step off at times here and there, and I think part of that is it seems like RVD maybe needs to slow down and find his rhythm a little bit more. He's going to be great if he learns to slow down and appreciate the pace and the psychology of matches a little bit more, but very minor complaint overall. And Taz looks like a fucking killer. There was a spot here, and this is one of the suplexes that Chris was alluding to. He just folded up RVD with a beautiful, perfect German suplex. RVD was literally bent in half. And still, all things considered, RVD was made to look very strong. He was in the Taz mission for a very, very long time before he tapped out. Everybody came off better than they were before this match here. And in my opinion, this was clearly the best match of the night.
Oh, it's that's not even in question. Yeah, I agree. One of those matches where both guys got over as a result of the finish. And one of those matches where it's the kind of finish, you can't do it too often, but it's the type of finish that I wish ECW would do more. Try and be a bit more decisive, and you can actually get both guys over, rather than trying to just cover things up with run-ins and interference and trying to protect both guys. You actually enhance both guys here with a more decisive finish, which helped. But the match was really good. A real contrast of styles, like you both said. I agree with Eric that Van Damme is the guy that has a lot of the tools right now, just needs to learn what to do with them. But that's going to be exciting to see how he learns to have this kind of better style of match, a slower style of match where he can show off what he can do, but in a way that actually means more rather than just that chaotic type of tag match he was having with Sabu, which has its own strengths. I think one of the big points regarding Taz is that as good a year as he's had, I don't know how many great matches he's had. This was one of them. One of the great matches, standout matches. This was a standout match for Taz. In the sense that it felt like it got him over, but not in a way that was just a pure squash, in a way that was like, actually, we saw more of what Taz can do. So yeah, I mean, and that really good. And Chris, excited for Taz and Sabu because you think it's going to be this kind of match? Because, I mean, I didn't finish this match and go, oh, yay, great Taz and Sabu, necessarily.
See, I was going with the sort of, if you look at the styles and that they can go together the way they did there with RVD and Taz did with this match. I thought that, the styles work together, and I can imagine Sabu taking some of those suplexes and probably knowing how Sabu's mind works will probably go, that suplex that you do where you sort of launch someone, how about you put me through a table while doing it? It's going to be one of those sort of, when it finally happens, it's going to be amazing. And it was just enough of a sort of taster to it to make me think that sort of see how good it will be when it finally gets there.
Yeah, I prefer this kind of taster to the kind of taster where Joey Styles desperately attempts to fill in wrestlers wrestling Taz and saying, oh, that's a Sabu type move, where it's just an ordinary move, Joey, calm down. I prefer this kind of thing where it's like, this is the kind of match we could see between these two. I think that's a stronger story. But yeah, in short, one of those matches where both guys were more over at the end than they were at the start. Eric, you'll have seen bits of him, but thoughts on Bill Alfonso?
I wouldn't be so upset if as part of that Taz Sabu blow off that before Taz went through a table that maybe Fonzie did and swallowed that fucking whistle. I think he'd be a fine manager overall. He's a smarmy little heel. He's kind of like your extreme Jimmy Hart. How Jimmy Hart has the megaphone, Alfonso has that whistle. But gosh, that whistle, I know it's said every month, and I'm going to step in here to the ECW pod and say it myself. That whistle is beyond getting heat at this point. It's just annoying, and you can't even listen to the matches. You have to turn down the sound at some points because it's so grating, and it just at this point adds nothing to Taz, and it almost detracts from the in-ring action because you can't help but keep one ear on that.
I don't know about that. I mean, that was the kind of thing I'm going to say, and you'll hear me discuss this on the end of year shows, is that I feel the Alfonso act has survived the test of time for such a very two-dimensional act. There's not a lot to it. Comes out, he's smarmy, he's annoying, he hides behind Taz, the match starts, he blows a whistle a lot, and he's blown a whistle a lot more in other matches in previous months than he did do here, it should be said.
Fair enough.
And then when the camera gets on him, he offers some heel-type running commentary. Chris, I think the Alfonso character is holding up, do you?
Yeah, the fact that, you know, we say it in sort of jest every month, that fucking whistle, we sort of know that we're meant to hate him. You know, that's the point of a heel manager. You know, the thing about him we are meant to hate, and it's working. So, you know, as of now, I'm still quite happy with him being there, doing what he's doing, and, you know, being who he is. Sort of give it another year, that might change. But, you know, as of now, you know, we've had a year and a bit of it, and he's still, you know, doing a good job because I fucking hate that whistle and I hate him. But I don't want to see him gone.
Yeah, I'm kind of of the feeling that even if Taz wins the match in April, I wouldn't mind them writing off Alfonso for a while. Just because I think you're right. If he's around for another 12 months in the same kind of role, his positives might not be able to outweigh his negatives for a lot longer. But at the moment, he's fine. At the moment, it's working. But yeah, I think that even in a losing effort, Sabu needs to take out Fonzie. Even if Sabu loses the match, that needs to be one that he takes down with him. And then you can, you know, take Fonzie off of telly for a few months and then bring him back either with Taz or something different. I think that'd be
probably moaning about something, knowing him.
Yeah. Here's Devon and Axel Rotten. They get interrupted by the BWO, who are throwing bingo cards into the crowd. We get a brief promo from both Meaty and Nova, and the Richards tell us to buy the shirt, in the style of Kevin Nash. I thought was really good. Richards then calls him Ian Rotten, which riles him up. Devon hits Meaty with a chair, and the match starts out. It looks like Richards, oh no, it's not. Here are the gangsters. The BWO have just buggered off. So I think it's Devon Dudley and Axel Rotten versus the gangsters, New Jack and Mustafa. We get baking trays and the usual rack of rubbish. This is your usual gangster fare, including jump cuts. We see New Jack power-drive Devon by the stage while the other two are in the ring. And then my notes simply read, fucking hell. As New Jack puts Devon on the table on the floor, climbs up to the eagle's nest, and then just runs off with a fantastic splash. Must have been a good 10-feet drop, accentuated by some real nice camera work. Rotten hits a pedigree onto Mustafa. Stevie lines him up and then hits a lovely super kick. We then cut again. New Jack comes off the top with a splash holding a chair, pins Rotten for the 3, and then the segment finishes with New Jack and Mustafa putting a BWO shirt on as the BWO look on in the crowd, quite happy. Should be said, while we're on the subject, BWO now have a fourth member. It's Rob Feinstein, the kind of guy that films a lot of the shows. He was on a couple of months ago on camera. They've dressed him up as 6, or aka the 1-2-3 Kid, and they're calling him 3.5, which I think is quite good anyway. Eric, what do you think of all this?
Well, this was your an above-average gangsters match, and it's the only match they're capable of really doing, so it was fine. It was nice of Devon to fall asleep on the table long enough for New Jack to climb all the way up and hit him with that. It turned out to be a beautiful splash. Good match, but, fair is fair. I feel kind of the same way about the gangsters as our friend Jeff Parker feels about Shawn Michaels, so I don't know if I'm the best critic of a match like this.
Moving swiftly on, Chris.
As Eric was saying, it's pretty much, gangsters by numbers. But that stage dive, Fuck me, that was impressive.
It looked like he was skydiving. Like it's just, the thing that made the move so spectacular wasn't just everything else. New Jack takes a run up, jumps, and then for about a good half a second just manages to hold his position while he's flying through the air. The camera gets a real nice view of it. And then he just goes covering a skydiving position, crashing through Devon. Looked really nice.
And I loved how Devon sold it with the sort of convulsing afterwards. Sort of, give Devon some dues there for selling it even more to make it look better than it already did. I wouldn't imagine that he'll be doing this too often, because I can't imagine it being the safest of ideas for diving off things like that. But, it's a new chunk to the arsenal of the gangsters.
Watch New Jack just
jumping off shit.
Yeah. It's not the worst thing to have. But yeah, it was alright. We didn't see enough of it to really make a judgment, and it was another kind of arena-wide brawl in amongst your usual kind of fare. But yeah, that splash made that match. I'm not sure anything else would have done. BWO's nice. They've been doing the BWO stuff all month. I'm not sure it's been necessarily as strong as it was last month, barring the odd little bit. But they've got the BWO shirts now in blue and white that look really, really nice. And yeah, they've done an okay job. It was, I suspect one of those matches more for the live crowd than for anyone else, and more power to them in that respect. We move on to the semi-main. We're kind of rattling through this show, all the bits we saw of it. Anyway, it's Shane Douglas and Francine versus Tommy Dreamer and Beulah McGillicuddy. Fans chant Little Dick at Douglas. Music hits, but Douglas grabs the mic. He wants a proper intro, then insists on announcing Francine himself. Francine looks very, very good in wrestling gear. So does Beulah, who gets a hero's welcome. Douglas asks Dreamer what's he going to do when Funk isn't here. He calls Beulah a wench, tells the fans to kick his ass. Dreamer calls Francine a no good slut, and the match starts with Douglas hitting Dreamer with the title belt. Douglas baseball slides Dreamer into the guardrail, who cracks his knee off of it. Fans do the Francine takes it up the ass doodah song. Douglas hits him with a chair. He then hits a drop kicks the chair into Dreamer's leg. Francine gets involved, so Dreamer pulls her trunks down and ECW goes blurry. Francine slaps Dreamer and then jumps on his shoulders, enabling Douglas to regain control until he gets thrown off at the top. It's Douglas over the ankle with a chair. Joey Styles then ludicrously actually compares this match to the Thriller in Manila. Just going to let that one linger for a bit. Dreamer goes after Francine. Beulah gets tagged in, and the women immediately start rolling around, which gets huge ECW chants. Dreamer sets the pile drive Francine until Douglas stops him. He goes for the figure four. Dreamer escapes, then Douglas counters an Irish whip, sending Dreamer into Francine on the apron and sending Francine crashing into the guardrail. Another figure four until Beulah gets involved. Francine actually slaps a fan in the front row. That doesn't get mentioned, so I guess it wasn't a story. It wasn't the only story of some fan interaction in this match. I'll detail that in a second. Figure four, Francine comes off of the second rope and smashes a breaking tray onto Beulah's head. Dreamer pile drives Francine. We get big ECW chants. Dreamer goes to climb to the top, but Beulah stops him before going up there herself and hitting a highly dangerous and pretty good moonsault. I mean, all the credit in the world for trying. But it did look like she smashed her knees onto Francine's legs as she landed, which didn't look fun at all. Beulah does the Raven's pose, as does Dreamer. Douglas then levels Dreamer, and then he hits Beulah with a belly-to-belly and pins her for the clean win. Now, interesting about this, and I'll have to ask both of you because I didn't pick up on it at the time, and it's possible the reason I didn't was it wasn't in the video. Stories in this match of Shane Douglas getting into an altercation with a fan on more than one occasion. Apparently the fan threw the first punch and Douglas started retaliating, and Dreamer, God bless him, got involved and managed to calm the situation down. Then apparently later on in the match, Douglas went back to the fan and started attacking someone, apparently with someone else, i.e. attacked the wrong person. Chris, did you pick up on any of that? I didn't see any of it during the match. It's only stuff I've read subsequently.
No, I was going to say, what if it did happen, which I'd imagine it did, because obviously the reports, it wasn't shown on camera.
No, I don't recall any big jump cuts in this, but I'm guessing kind of brawling in the crowd, you can edit around that without too much problem. But yeah, like, there was the bit, I don't know whether there was anything, but Francine ended up slapping someone in the front row as well. So I don't know whether those two things were linked either. But Chris, I think just an illustration of, well, I don't want to say what Douglas has got going for him. You know, there is a fantastic piece in the Pro Wrestling Talks by Bruce Mitchell, which I highly recommend everyone goes back and read. Just about everything ECW around the mass transit thing, about pay-per-view thing, and just talking about ECW in general. And he kind of said, it's just one of those things where it's like, it just all adds up. Douglas getting into a fight with people in the crowd is just part of what ECW is about, and not necessarily in a good way. Your thoughts on that and on this match?
Well, we'll sort of do the Douglas thing first. It is a good thing because it shows that Shane is that much of a heel and hated that much that fans are going to swing at him. It shows a bit of an unprofessionalness that, he's punched back, but, you go to ECW, you sort of have to expect it. As for the match, this was really, really enjoyable. The norm, man on women violence. It's ECW, we expect it. Both the girls did really well, as they're both not actual wrestlers. You were saying, obviously, that moonsault looked a little bit shady with, landing on the knees from Beulah. And obviously, this gives both Shane and Dreamer another feud to sort of sit on that isn't either Raven or the Pitbulls. And obviously you can use, as we did, as Eric said earlier, obviously you can put Louis Piccoli in with the Pitbulls, but you can also use Tommy now as well, in with the Pitbulls, sort of to even it up if they get into the 6-on-6 sort of stuff, or 3-on-3 stuff, should I say. It was the sort of match that you would get at an ECW event that does exactly what you expect it to do, to the standard you expect it to do, and it's as good as it should be, which is as you'd expect from the professionals that they are, that they can do the job that's expected of them.
Eric,
this isn't an angle for equal rights. I think we'll get that made that very clear. I think, I'll look at the positives here. Shane, in my opinion, and I don't think it's a controversial one, is probably the best all-around performer in ECW. We've talked about he's not the greatest wrestler. He's probably not even the best they have directly on the microphone. But when you put everything together, yeah, he's money, and it's no wonder why he gets so much heat from the crowd. I didn't see the brawl either, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if the lines of kayfabe got blurred with Shane. This was, for what this was a perfectly acceptable match in terms of what ECW wants to do and what they want to present. Even all that said, even with all the caveats, this is ECW. It's still not fun, at least for me to watch. For example, Tommy grabbed Francine by the crotch and then puts her up for a pile driver and her dress falls off. And that, as much as I watch ECW and I've seen pretty much every major show of the last couple of years, it still doesn't make it comfortable, or I don't get used to it. And so if you kind of learn to turn your head at those, this was a perfectly fine match, but I'd like to see them move away from these kind of angles as they go into 1997 and try to expand the business. And I think they're going to have to if they want to get a pay-per-view and want to get a national audience.
Yeah, this is one of those matches where I think in isolation it's quite a fun match, and there were some things definitely working for it in the sense that the women felt like the star attraction in this match. I mean, it helped that Douglas and Dreamer, as they should have done, handled the bulk of the match. But it felt like from the get-go they were almost kind of the side attraction to the women. Like Beulah was. It's been a while since a character or actor's got that kind of babyface reaction in ECW, or feels like it. And in part because, she's babyface Beulah and, you don't see her very often and all that kind of thing. But we've been down the road with females in ECW before, and it kind of touches on that wider point that Bruce Mitchell got at, that ECW is a product of its audience. and it knows its audience, which is a big strength, but it's also a big weakness in the sense that pushing stuff towards that niche does kind of run perpendicular from growth, essentially. As Erick alludes to, if you want to grow ECW onto a more nationwide stage, into a more palatable product while retaining those kind of quote-unquote hardcore values, this is the kind of thing that you are going to have to get away from. I think there are, if you're looking at different kind of aspects and different kind of characteristics of ECW as a whole, this is one of the things that won't survive the quote-unquote expansion, I don't think.
And it shouldn't.
No, you're right. But equally, let's put all that aside and bring this back into the realm that ECW is in right now. I thought this worked really well. It was, we talk about fresh matchups. We've done Douglas and Dreamer before, but it felt a little bit fresh. And when you had the women in it, felt a bit more fresh. And Douglas, as we alluded to in this match, as we've seen over the last few months, is really over as a heel in front of this audience. Like, impressively so. Talk about Alfonso. Alfonso's more annoying, and I'm sure Taz might like to think of himself as ECW's biggest heel. He's not. This guy is. This guy's getting the reaction. It's the old thing that the smart fans are the easiest ones to work. Douglas is the one that's getting the reaction. But yeah, Chris, what do you think about the whole kind of ECW expansion stuff and all that kind of thing? Because this is one of those things that isn't going to survive, I don't think.
This is a sort of a conundrum that they've got to be looking at. What are they willing to change or even give up in going forth and being sort of more mainstream and getting a bigger audience? Because the few thousand that go religiously to the ECW arena expect what they see most weeks. They see, man on woman violence, flaming tables, people jumping off sort of high ceilings through tables and all that sort of stuff. How much of that can be kept for the mainstream, or do you keep it all in and go, this is why we're different? It is that sort of how much they want it, because if they keep it all in, then they're going to find very quickly that the mainstream shuns it, because the mainstream aren't going to like the man on women violence. Some of the stuff that we've seen them do, sort of the table stunts that we've seen them do, they'd probably question some of that too. But then would they then just be an ECW light? Would that then have the main core audience, which has been behind them since the inception 3 years ago? Would they then leave because it isn't true to what it has been and what it is that's got them to where they are now?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be a thing that will manifest itself in the next few months. One of the stuff I was reading about kind of going into these pay-per-view discussions is the pay-per-view providers want a lot of assurances up front, both in terms of, they want doctors and medics on site. They want, after the Erick Koulis thing, they want clearance on exactly who's going to be on this show. And one of the things that, Paul Heyman, I suspect, he says he's happy to do it. I'm not sure it would work if he wasn't. He's saying, yeah, that's fine. We'll let you know who's going to be on the show, in part because they're all going to be under contract. So that makes sense. But I think as well, the other thing is they kind of want assurances over what the boundaries are. And this is by no means the most extreme thing that we've seen from ECW, but what pay-per-view providers might see as extreme and what a wrestling fan might see as extreme are probably two different things, and this is going to be one of them. I think. I don't know that a pay-per-view provider is going to want to see man on woman violence. In fact, I'd make a very good guess that they're probably not going to. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of thing plays off. But in the world that we're in right now, and in ECW in the bubble that it's in right now, I think this just about works. Other than Joe Styles comparing it to the Thriller in Manila. Anyway. Move on to the main event. We have presumably quite a long interval because the main event is a barbed wire rope match for the ECW title between Raven and the Sandman. Raven has tied his hair back, which is a surprisingly strong look, actually, compared to what he usually looks like. He's obviously done that back so his hair doesn't get caught in the ropes. Sandman at the start of the match also gets his trousers torn in the ring ropes too, so that didn't work for him either. But yeah, so all in all, basically they just took down the 3 ropes and just replaced them with barbed wire. So here we go. Raven hits a snapmare, then punches Sandman in the nuts. Sandman goes for a spinning toe hold. Raven kicks him off, and Sandman falls into the ropes and basically ends up being hung about halfway down to the floor. Raven picks up Sandman and crotches him on the barbed wire. Raven props up a table against the guardrail, then flings Sandman into it. Sandman lands on it and then breaks it as he falls backwards in the other direction. On the table, this time Raven puts it in the ring. Raven rolls Sandman into the ring and kindly lifts the barbed wire up so it won't get in Sandman's way. Sandman charges at Raven, pushes Raven into the barbed wire and puts himself through the table. Sandman then drops Raven across the barbed wire. Sandman has Raven's shirt and that's got barbed wire stuck to it. He whips Raven with it. Sandman's shirt says, "Pop one open, fire one up, now let's get extreme." I got a good view of that while Raven was hitting him with a cane. Sandman gets draped over the top rope of barbed wire. Sandman takes some wire cutters and is basically taking the ropes apart. He wraps Raven in barbed wire, then wraps himself in it, His face is bloody before running off of the ring and hitting a jumping cane shot. Sandman took a run up, then threw himself at Raven, who moved off of the table, and Sandman went through it. We get tabled in the ring. Raven gets Sandman on it, then attempts to pile drive him through it. Predictably, the whole thing collapses before he can do it. That was inevitable. I don't know why he ever thought that was going to work. Raven then pile drives Sandman onto the broken table, pins Sandman in one of the flattest title change reactions I have ever seen in the ECW arena. Eric.
Boy, Gotch and Hackenschmidt, this was not. I was disappointed at that flat reaction, Bob, that you mentioned, because for what this match was, these guys went out there and absolutely killed themselves to entertain that crowd, to pop that crowd after what seemed to be a pretty long card, and the crowd just did not give them the reaction that I think they deserved. Maybe they were just disappointed that Raven won and this feud is going to continue. I don't know. But boy, these guys just absolutely brutalized themselves. And as far as barbed wire matches go, this is pretty much what they are in my experience. I've seen a fair bit of Japanese death matches, a few of ECW's prior barbed wire matches, and this is what they are. And for what it was good. And it's just, if you can get past the obvious pain that these guys were probably in throughout, they did a pretty good job. And as far as Sandman matches go, this is kind of what they have to be, and it was just fine.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's just one of those things that, a barbed wire match is restricting, and you're working with 2 quite limited guys anyway, and this is what you get.
Yeah, it pretty much was as good as it could be, really, between these 2 in a barbed wire match. It's one of those of the whole concept of the barbed wire ropes. I think it doesn't really work. You could have the barbed wire match and sort of either do it though, it's a sort of fence of barbed wire, or, you've got the tables with barbed wire on or something like that. But the sort of the ropes, because it limits even more what people can do, and then they sort of got the wire cutters out to get out of the ring and do things like that. It just doesn't really work. And, it was what you expected. It was hard hitting, it was violent, There was bit moments of people wrapping each other in barbed wire, but it shows that this is all that you can do in these type of matches, and I'd quite like.
Chris, would it be fair to say that? Chris, would it be fair to say that 2 much better wrestlers would have got a better match out of this format? Because I felt like for the first few minutes this was going to be a really interesting match, just to see how these 2 work when they couldn't use a lot of shortcuts, and then they just started using a lot of shortcuts anyway, and I kind of went a bit flat.
Well, the thing is, it'd be one of those of, if you use the concept of the barbed wire being around the ring as a way to keep people in, i.e. like a cage match, but then use the barbed wire like sort of how the WWF does when they have their cage matches, where they'll rub their face against the cage, or they'll whip them into the cage. but the majority of the match is done in the ring. It'll be, doing things to keep away from the edge. You have two better guys in there, for argument's sake, Tommy and Shane. They would probably do a much better match than these two, but it's because those two can work in the limitations of being in a ring and sort of doing actual wrestling. Whereas, if Sandman doesn't have his cane, he's pretty much, that's him limited to what he can do, or going up the top rope to do that awful leg drop.
Yeah, I think the onus on this style of match is that you've got to really build to the danger spots, and I felt they just got there way too quickly. Like, for a couple of minutes, it felt like they were going to try some wrestling and try some teasers of whipping one another into the ropes and not being able to do it. And then it just started, and then we got to the outside, and it's like, oh, it's just another match. And it was like, I was actually a little bit disappointed, because I was thinking, oh, this is, how can these two pull off a good match in the confines of a ring because they can't get out? You build to it, you tease the spots, you do the barbed wire spots, and then you kind of come to a conclusion. As it was, they got out. Yeah, the best spots in the match were probably the early spots. The best spots were when Sabu kind of got properly thrown into the ropes and ended up kind of halfway towards the floor, kind of being held on by barbed wire. And when he got crotched on them later on, that was about it. It got to the outside and it was just another match. And then, Chris, we get to the finish. They try the pile driver on the table spot, which people happened earlier in the night with Sabu and Saturn. Seemed a bit folly anyway. Full stop. I mean, just, those tables aren't going to take two people's weight. Certainly not of those size.
No.
And then, I think as Erick alluded to, I think the crowd were flat for the title change because it was, it's Raven again. That was the impression I got.
To be fair, when Sandman won it, they weren't overly enamoured. So, are they really that fussed of either of these two having the title? I mean, you could quite have easily had
they popped when Sandman pinned Richards, didn't they? I mean, maybe they just popped for the change, but they didn't pop for the change here.
But it's just one of those where I think they could do so much more with that title than what they're doing with it. I get,
we've had this discussion a lot before. I think it's we could probably have more in the end of year review. But yeah, it's just this feud feels like it's been going on forever, and it's one of those like it doesn't really feel like it's ever any good, and it was still here. Erick, any more thoughts?
We talk about the heavyweight title being on the wrong guy, and I'm not going to repeat what you guys have said over the course of months, other than I agree with it. It just feels like, other than the tag belts, it almost feels like Shane should have the world belt, and Raven and Sandman can go on and have their feud. And Raven's taken enough from Sandman. In storyline purposes, I wonder if Sandman even cares about the belt, considering his family has been taken from him. And then maybe put the TV title on a good worker like Taz or on Sabu and give that feud some extra boost, and have RVD in there too. Just something to get the world belt away from these guys. Put Shane in the main event where I think he belongs to be. Move these guys down the card and just kind of reshuffle the order of things, because this did not, like you said, the crowd did not treat this as a main event. The championship belt seemed secondary, or even lower than that in all the stakes in this match. And yeah, so I agree. Everything that's been said over the past 6 months between these guys can be repeated here, and it's just starting to become even more obvious if it wasn't already.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think it's Dave Meltzer mentioned that the possible kind of co-headliner of the pay-per-view could be Terry Funk and Raven. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that Terry Funk is a great prospect at his age anymore. I also don't know, it's one of those things. I don't know if there's anybody in that position on ECW's card that could be used alongside Funk to where the match quality would be of a massively high standard. So in that case, you might as well do Raven, in that he's probably got the prestige, and him and Funk could be fun. They could have a lot of fun build ahead of that match.
And those guys are two guys who are willing to take an absolute beating. So if that's the match they want to do, then yeah, I think Raven's just as good as anybody else to take a pounding from Funk.
Just hopefully we can move on from Raven and Sandman. But as I kind of said last month, while Raven's still got Sandman's family, does feel a bit like we're just waiting for that to come to a conclusion or some form of close. Anyway, that will wrap up our review of this show. Chris, your overall thoughts on the show and a score rating out of 10.
Well, it was, again, another one of those mixed bag ECW shows where we've had some really good and we've had some fucking utter rubbish. The fact it was only 90 minutes does help, so I'm giving it 6 out of 10.
Eric.
RVD Taz was clearly the best match of the night, in my opinion. The opening tag was fun, too. There was a lot of really gross stuff on this, but that's what you get for ECW, and it's part of the package. Again, 90-minute show definitely helps. This was an average. I give it a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, 5 from me. RVD and Taz was very good without being outstanding. Everything else kind of was what it was. There was noteworthy things in a lot of matches without anything really being that standout. But, a fun little 90-minute show. I wonder how we'd have pursued this show had we had a really good Saturn and Sabu match. And I kind of feel like those two could have a really good match if they get the time. That's the kind of match they might do next month. I'd be intrigued to see if they did. But yeah, 5 out of 10 from me.
Good evening, losers. I'm the quintessential stud muffin, Joel Gertner. And in case you missed last week's grim, gaudy, somewhat Gertner-lacking escapade, allow me to give you a brief recap of what happened on last week's program. Sandman lost, Raven won. End of story. That's it. Nothing more. And what's perhaps more significant than the fact that the Sandman has now lost his belt, lost his wife, lost his child, is that not only did the alcohol-dependent, nicotine-addicted, cane-swinging, barroom brawler, pool hall pest, swapping scourge upon the Wrestling Society lose his championship, but that his main adversary, Raven, the post-Generation X slacker, came out of rehab to win the ECW title. And what's perhaps even more significant than all of this is not that Raven won the belt, but that I, Joel Gertner, predicted it weeks ago. I knew it was going to happen. I saw it on the horizon. I told everybody. And nobody listened. I was right. You were wrong. I was right. You were wrong. You were wrong. I was right. Right, wrong, right, wrong, right. Not like Lance Wright, that wannabe Sunday morning superstar, but right like Joel Gertner, and not wrong like you. Right, wrong, right, wrong. Heads I win, tails you lose. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Lesson taught, lesson learned. You're out of luck, 'cause I'm out of time. Educated, ignorant. Important, impotent. Wealthy, welfare. Wannabe, Joel Gertner.
And just the TVs to finish, we start on December the 10th with Joe Styles giving us a potted history of the ECW World Title. From Douglas in 94 through until Raven's latest win at the weekend. Seriously, ECW, I'm not sure reminding us of all these really average championship reigns was such a good idea. Anyway, December, as I kind of said at the top of the show, one of those months where ECW kind of didn't have that much stuff to show us. We got a lot of live event stuff. Well, they're all live events, but a lot of non-ECW arena live event stuff. And a lot of look backs from the year, etc., which was probably more good than bad. We see the BWO angle and subsequent Devon and Axel Gangsters match. The New Jack table spot looked really good. The BWO interrupt Joel Gertner. They need an announcer, and Stevie says Gertner can be their Bish. Gertner stands up for Bischoff before saying if the BWO wants the Hype Central segment, they can have it. We get brief promos from Van Dam, then Taz and Alfonso. We then get an interview from Chris Candido setting up his cold illness for this match we're about to see between Spicoli and Brian Lee. Candido was really good there. We see the match then the conclusion with a promo from Raven. He says there's only one man who's capable of beating him, and he's been trying to do it since he was a child. Joey says Tommy Dreamer's name. Raven says, no, me. December the 17th starts with an unbearable promo from Joel Gertner. He really is annoying. Joe Styles gets a bit shirty about Todd Pettengill using the term Holiday Hell. We see a Mitch tag from Holiday Hell followed by a promo from Shane Douglas where he's bragging about how he hooked the leg and grapevine the head just to be sure of pinning Bueller. Then more Gertner. Really nice from Douglas, that. Rubbing in, pinning a female, essentially valet. I thought it was good. We then get a montage looking back at Douglas's year. During this clip, we go back to the real early days in 1993 when Douglas turned on Dreamer during a tag match against Kevin Sullivan and what was then the Tasmaniac. Douglas nailed Dreamer with a chain. We then see a clip from Holiday Hell this month of Dreamer having the chain on him but not being able to use it. Then a match where Douglas nailed Dreamer with a chain and the ref disqualified Dreamer. Again, that was from 3 years ago. We get Wish Happy Hollywood Days from the BWO. Nova can't rip off the BWO shirt. Steve Richards is feeling generous. If you buy 1 million BWO shirts, you can get one free. Can't really argue with that. December the 24th opens up at the Orange County Fairgrounds of New York with the King of the Hill Battle Royal. Taz, who's carrying a shoulder injury, says he wanted to be seeded first, but as he isn't, he won't be competing. He calls out Sabu, the light goes out, and when they come back out, Sabu appears. But it's all a bruise as the Eliminators come out from nowhere and hit a total elimination on Sabu. They beat up Sabu for a while, and apparently the match has started. This is like a Royal Rumble type thing, although it seems like you could be eliminated by being thrown over the top or by being pinned. Which I guess actually is quite a nice addition. These are my notes. They're not extensive, but we'll discuss them at the end. The gangsters get eliminated. The Eliminators get eliminated, and I don't make note of them. I didn't see that bit. The Battle Royal breaks down with the gangsters and the Eliminators going at it. The Eliminators eliminate the gangsters, then do a double pile driver onto Sabu. Van Dam comes out wearing his pajamas, it looks like. Next up is ECW newbie Balls Mahoney, then Little Guido. Spike gets pinned. Next out is Bubba. We then get a string of eliminations, which leaves us with Sabu, Bubba, and the Eliminators who are dominating this. And here's Candido. Sabu came off the second rope, but inadvertently took out both Eliminators. Brian Lee comes out and gets a large rest in peace chant. Lee eliminates Bubba by doing his primetime slam to a table on the floor, which won't ever not look good. We get Douglas, followed by Dreamer, who's going for both Lee and Douglas. Douglas sees this coming and eliminates himself, which looks really nice. Sabu launches a chair at Saturn. Dreamer ends up nailing Devon with a chair. We see Louis Piccoli, who goes straight after Candido and eliminates him. Salman is here too, and the BWO. Stevie kicks Devon and eliminates him, and then hits Samo 1-2. Any idea that Lee's affiliation with Raven might create an alliance is short-lived as he eliminates all three members of the BWO. Lee eliminates Salman, Sabu eliminates Lee, and Sabu wins. Eric, this was probably the only bit of TV worth discussing. What do you think of this type of match and this, I don't want to call it filler, but I guess it kind of was. But as a live event, what do you think of this?
Well, I suspect it was filler. What I imagine is that this was maybe the slot they were going to show the Sabu-Perry Saturn match from Holiday Hell, and when that match turned out to be the shits, they had to fill it in with something. Maybe not. Maybe they were going to show this match all along. But either way, I think, this was a good little cluster match. Everybody got their stuff in. A lot of people looked strong, and I think good for Sabu to get a good win over practically the entire ECW roster in place of looking strong against Saturn. Keeps him strong, and looking forward to his match against Taz.
Chris, we talk about ECW's ability to be fluid with storylines and how things can intermingle. I think this was a good illustration of that.
Yeah, all the way through, you've got little sort of bits of story going on. You've got obviously the beginning bit with Taz and Sabu. You've got obviously the Gangsters and the Eliminators going at each other. Obviously the triple threat stuff with when Shane comes out, eliminates himself, and obviously Primetime and Candido helping each other. As Eric was saying, he sort of doesn't think this would have normally been on TV. But this is the sort of thing, if they sort of do these sort of matches at live events, it's the sort of thing, if I was going to a spot show, that I'd be quite happy to see something like this, because you're going to get to see all the people that you know off TV. And I think for pre-Christmas TV as well, perfectly fine to be put on.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. a nice little filler match that kind of got over a lot of little storylines in small different ways. And, you know, like a nice decisive win. It would have been nice if there had been something on it of note. I think there was money on it, I think they said. But other than that, it would have been nice if there had been a title shot on it or something like that if you want to set up January. I know it was a live event in New York and maybe they weren't planning on showing it. But it would have been a nice little bit of context, even if it was just a setup for something later in the night. Anyway, we get a long montage looking at Dreamer and Raven. Joel Gertner says ECW fans would rather have a man with style than a man called Styles. He introduces Shane Douglas. Douglas calls Dreamer a franchise wannabe. Bueller a penthouse pig. The BWO interrupt a singer in New York to chant BWO. Richards and Meany pose around the city. Santa starts chanting BWO. They tell him to shut up and Stevie super kicks him. We end with the news that the Eliminators have won the tag titles again. Final Hardcore TV of the year begins with a look back to the Gangsters winning the tag belts in August. We then see the finish of the match in New York, literally just the total elimination and the 3 count. Mustafa tries to take the belts away and we get a standoff between the 4 of them as the Gangsters hand over the title belts and the Eliminators raise the Gangsters' hands. We're going with a new triple threat of Shane Douglas, Brian Lee and Chris Candido. We then get a fan cam footage of Candido versus Van Damme. Shane Douglas comes out and gives Candido a chain. He levels Van Damme with the ref down. Louis comes out in a ref shirt, hits a Death Valley driver on Candido, and Van Damme pins him. Joey Styles is then speculating that Taz has a shoulder injury following his match with Van Damme. Taz cuts a promo by his car. He criticises Van Damme's use of a chair in that match. Taz says he's going to show him disrespect. Joel Gertner then wishes us a happy new year from Hype Central. Joey Styles then announces Terry Funk will be coming back to the ECW to face Brian Lee. I like that. Good little fresh match for Funk. Douglas is cutting a promo a week these days. They're clearly flagging material on this show, so we go back to the match between Douglas and Pitbull 2 from Heatwave in the summer, where Francine turns on Pitbull, though we do get to see her ass again, so there is that. We see Francine getting super bombed through a table, which was really good. I forgot how balmy this whole thing was. Douglas hits Pitbull 2 with a title belt, then breaks a bit of wood over his head. We follow that with the match from October where Douglas lobs Pitbull 1 to the mat via his halo. Whole thing is fantastic. Douglas being bundled out of the arena and peak Joel Gertner. Erick, quickly, you'll have seen this. What do you think of all the Douglas Pitbull stuff, the highlights? Just your thoughts on that.
Oh, it's so good. It's such a great angle. Just you have this horrible, horrible heel in Douglas taking Gary Wolf by the halo and throwing him down. Such a good angle. Blurs the line between kayfabe and reality, and what we were talking about, the crowd ate up every bit of it. Paulie attacking Gertner. Oh, it was just so fun to watch. So good to remember all these things that have happened leading up to this inevitable blow-off, I would imagine, between Douglas and Wolf at some point. So yeah, this is a top-notch angle, in my opinion.
We finished with a title match between Raven and Mikey Whipwreck in New York. It's about 5 minutes left in the show, so don't expect miracles. Laurie Fullington is also there, as are the Blue World Order, who appear in the crowd. We do get jump cut, which helps the time along. They're also clearly piping in BWO chants. Another jump cut, a DDT from Raven, and that's enough for him to retain. I'm expecting Soundman any minute now, and here he is. Raven DDTs him. Laurie starts caning Soundman. Mikey actually tried to stop her, but Raven just ran him over with a title belt. Soundman gets up, swings to the fences. Raven ducks, and Soundman gets DDT'd again. Raven snaps a Singapore cane. Soundman then hits a dangerous-looking DDT before grabbing half of the cane and the title belt before leaving with the title belt. And it looks like this one is going to go into 1997. And that is where we will finish that. Erick Landstrom, thank you very much.
Bob, it was a pleasure joining you and Chris on this foray into ECW. Good fun.
What are your kind of more general thoughts? It sounds like you've seen a fair bit of ECW. What are your thoughts on ECW around this time?
Yeah, I always like ECW, and I think there's clearly a progression that you can see if you started 94 and 95 to now, just in even in some of the complexity of storytelling, the amount of time that they give to build these long storylines, especially, you see Douglas and Gary Wolf. Shane and Sandman and Raven is going on too long, but at least there's substance to that story. I think ECW, if they can if they can figure out how to balance, and if they could figure out how to balance this, the problems we talked about with the mixed tag match into some of these really good, high quality storylines that they have and motivated performers, they're in a good place right now, but to pull out a 20 years ago mode, they never really were able to find that line, and it's disappointing.
Erick, you can be found on Twitter.
Yes, at Modern Day Lawyer.
Excellent. And Chris Lacey, Chris, thank you very much.
You're welcome as always, Bob.
Another year of ECW in the books. Chris, what you're just I know we're going to do it in a bit, but general thoughts on ECW around this time? Same kind of question.
Well, it's been another year where ECW sort of has moved forward with what we've sort of expected to see with them. You know, we've seen longer storylines, we've seen better story arcs, but at the same time, it is holding itself down with limitations. But as you said, we will get more into that in our year in review.
We will indeed. Chris, you can be found on Twitter.
At Lacey555666. And also my musings of WCW from 1992 on Super Brawls. Which is at Super Brawls on Twitter and obviously Super Brawls on iTunes.
Excellent. Quick reminder, we are on Patreon for $5 a month for early access for shows like this, or just to say thank you for all of our output. You can head to patreon.com/wrestling20rs, or links on our website and in the podcast description. 6 volumes for you this month. Volume 1, WCW looking at Starrcade. Volume 2, WWF looking at In Your House. It's Time. Volume 4, our latest foray into the UFC, looking at UFC Ultimate. Volume 5, we're about to take the end part of it a bit, looking at the end of year review, and Volume 6, the end of year awards. Anyway, you can find the podcast on Twitter at Wrestling20RS, Wrestling20RS.com for your back issues, your back episodes, your blogs, iTunes link, RSS subscription, everything's on the site. If you would like, you can donate to us on Patreon. If not, that's absolutely fine. And we will roll on into 1997. You can find me on Twitter at Bamber. And this has been Volume 3 of the December 1996 edition of the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. And until next time, goodbye.